Welcome to Postdoom, regenerative conversations exploring overshoot grief, grounding, and gratitude. I'm your host, Michael Dowd. And in this conversation with George Tsakraklides, we had in late March of 2022, we covered a whole bunch of topics because I learned of George a couple years ago. He's a brilliant writer, both fiction and nonfiction. He has a podcast, George Reads George. And he actually writes with a deep grounding in, and speaks with a deep grounding in a love of life, biology specifically, botany specifically, but also a critique of civilization and the whole world of profit. So you'll see that early on we discuss something we don't see quite the same way, but the vast majority we do align on, and I think he's a real important prophetic voice. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. George, I've been looking forward to this for probably 2 years now, since I first discovered you. I think it was on Facebook. Actually, I think somebody recommended you, and then it was like I began reading some of your posts. It was like, wow, this is, I actually thought you were younger than you are. But, you write with such, well, first of all, you're a good writer, and I understand. How many languages do you speak? I'm curious.
Just English and Greek.
Yeah,
I'm not very talented with languages.
Yeah, no, I only speak English. So at any rate, what I like to do at the beginning is just ask my guests to introduce themselves for anybody who's not read you, who's not familiar with you. Help us get you. Like, what are you proudest of in terms of your accomplishments? What are you known for? What are your passions? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Who am I? So my training is in science. So I've always been curious and in a sort of scientific and methodical way of understanding nature. And I've been interested always in biology and all beings, especially plants. Since I was a kid, I was a bit of a strange kid, always growing plants from seed and just doing things that a normal kid doesn't really do. So I was a little botanist from the age of 5. I just had a very high, I guess, sensitivity for living things. I guess I was born with an environmental conscience, if you want to call it that. And I've seen many plants go extinct in my actual lifetime over in Greece, in northern Greece, where I grew up. So I grew up on the beach with lots of sunshine and natural environment, and my parents would take me up to the mountain where there was a lot of wild nature and rare kind of plants and species that I would kind of look up on books. And then, life became busy. I grew up, I got 3 degrees and, got in the system, and then started working in the corporate world, and life got really serious and very
What were your degrees?
Chemistry, food microbiology, and plant molecular biology. So still in the biology world,
Sure.
On the edge of biology, but from a very, I guess, human-centered perspective. Sure. Of, what plant can we genetically engineer next? How are we going to turn this plant into a food? What's in it for us? It was very, very industrial, especially when you go to the food chemistry and food science side of things. You kind of start realizing how artificial our food is. Yes. So I studied all that because deep down I could see a connection, because I wanted to explore the connection, my understanding of the physical and the biological world that surrounds me, and that is the basis of all life. And like I said, it just, I became another corporate person, helping different companies increase their profit margin. And then I had a really I guess it was a wake-up call. I had a difficult experience in a company with working in a very toxic environment with lots of bullying and backstabbing. And I kind of woke up after that, realizing how toxic our entire civilization is. Everything is done for profit. Everything is done for power. And we try to bully each other and bully nature, all for the benefit of the profit of not just the corporation. Our entire society is built on profit, is built on money, is built on exploitation, because exploitation is necessary for profit. And I always say that human rights and nature are the enemy of profit. Profit.
Hold on a second. Yeah, human rights and nature are the enemy of profit. Absolutely. I like that. I'm always alerted to memes, things that are tight, concise, and that communicate something worldview significance. I like that thinking.
Yeah. Profit, and this is how capitalism began. When it began to take off, really, it was through slavery. It was through the more efficient, fast, and upscaled destruction of nature, which hasn't really changed in principle. Even when there was just bands and tribes of us going through the savannah, we were still using up things without realizing that, hey, these animals, if we kill all of them, there isn't going to be a flock for next year. And there wasn't. We made them extinct even back then. So we've been doing it since the beginning of time. This is another thing that I think lots of environmentalists sort of try to challenge them. No, we used to be this really benign animal. No, we just didn't have the guns and the manufacturing, processing technology back then to have such a huge impact on the world. And of course, there wasn't 8 billion of us on the planet.
Right.
So I became a writer. I became a disillusioned human being, questioning my purpose on this world as the only species out of the 8 million species on this planet who offers nothing to Earth. If you think about it, we are the only species that has nothing to offer to this planet. I know it's a very harsh reality, but since we are not part of an ecosystem anymore, we are more of a parasite. So we need the ecosystem, but we don't give something back to that ecosystem. We are actually the only species that Earth would not miss.
Yeah, I agree with everything, with the one caveat that one of the things that I've spent a lot of time studying in the last 9 years, especially, but my wife's most significant mentor, who is a dear friend and mentor, we stayed at his house a number of times, Paul Martin, who's of course the father of the overkill hypothesis. And my wife even led a song at his memorial service, "Bring Back the Elephants." And I think I can confidently claim that Paul would be turning over in his grave if he thought that his theory, which is now accepted as fact widely, in terms of human overkill of the megafauna, was being used to support the idea that humans are incapable of living in place without destroying the place. So one of the things that one of the places where we could lean into, because I think we have a different understanding, but I don't want to really spend a lot of time on it in this call, because I really want you to share all your stuff. But I just wanted to mention that for example, this book here, the title's backward, Tending the Wild. For about 95% of human history, in terms of cultures that lived with an I-thou relationship to the living world, treating the living world as a greater thou, not a lesser it, basically, a kincentric understanding. They knew that if they were migrating, they always wiped out the big mammals. Whenever humans show up with a spear or any kind of ability to kill at a distance, the big mammals go out. But once that occurs and they actually become native to place, they can live and did live for thousands of years without destroying the place, which is why the taboos are set up. Unfortunately, once human beings started mining metals and competing, they all got wiped out. And so I fully agree with you that virtually all human beings in all societies now play no positive role, but there is a long tradition of humans not just tending the wild, which is the title of this book, but actually by paying attention, making it more fecund, more rich and diverse, not just for humans. So that's something.
Tell you what, I can meet you halfway.
Okay.
Because it is true that the more our civilization becomes advanced, the more we don't even know what a tree even looks like, the less we're able to appreciate it. People who were surrounded by nature every minute, every hour, they had developed almost an unspoken connection. And it's something I actually have not appreciated as much because I'm part of this generation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would never use the word advanced for our civilization or our technology. I mean, one of the things that always drives me crazy when I see astronomy magazines say something like, are we alone? The implication is, are we the only advanced consciousness in the universe? And to define ecocidal consciousness that's all about taking from nature, exuding waste, and thinking that human well-being and wealth and progress are one way, that's actually insane from a Earth systems perspective. So I refuse to grant the word advanced for that. But in any case, I want to come back to your story.
What I always say is, however many innovations we make, however many planets we go to, however many solar systems we conquer, we will still bomb the children in Ukraine. We still will. Even then, we will be bombing the children.
Do you actually believe that we'll get off I'm curious, what is your view of, well, let me back up. Okay. So
I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because one of the things that I want, well, actually first, just finish like in 5 minutes, just give people, your books, mention some of your things, and then we'll come back to your story in terms of how you grew up and how you came to your current worldview. But I want people to just understand, what you now do and are known for. You haven't touched on that yet.
Sorry, I was avoiding it. In a nutshell, I'm a writer. I write mostly essays around the collection of toxic crises of humanity, not just climate change, but it is a whole syndrome of climate change, burnout, climate justice, exploitation, extinction, the 6 max extinction. It is all very much connected. And sometimes I go into poetry. So there's books out there. There are poetry collections, and I've recently written a climate fiction book, actually, which I never thought I would do. So check that out. It's called A New Earth, The Apocalypse Locus. It's about a bunch of scientists that come across a gene that's a very ancient gene that goes back to the origin of life, and they end up finding some explanation for why we are where we are. And anyway,
okay.
So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more. I already know that just from exploring your website. But I would love to know, okay, first of all, I'm just curious. This is just, personal curiosity. Are you firstborn, only child, lastborn? Like, where are you in the birth order?
I have an older sister.
Yeah. Okay. And you were born in like the early mid 70s?
Yeah, mid 70s. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what was your worldview as a child growing up in Greece? And then how did you come to the worldview that you now have? And were there any major crises or mentors or books, or, like a little bit about your trajectory from how you understood things growing up, and then any big events that then have gotten to where you are now, and how you hold the nature of our predicament, and then the nature, how you view the future.
So I grew up as a normal kid in a way. I had everything at my disposal. I had both my parents. I had my education. I ended up going to university. I always had a certain sensitivity. My mother always called me a sensitive kid. I guess that was the first indication that I was an empath. I could feel not just people, but I could feel nature. When somebody stepped on a flower, I would hurt. It was just, for me, it was just something that I knew I was different from other people in that respect, other humans. But for quite a long time, I ignored it. I tried to be normal. I tried to be a person that is ambitious and aggressive about their career, a person who is studying biology and plants and animals, but studies them for human exploitation, to go into a corporate job, not to protect the environment. I was in denial in many ways of who I am. And then events in my life around my 40s mostly, and I guess perhaps the biggest turning point for me, funnily enough, was the movie Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore.
Yeah.
I think that we're talking 2007.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was the moment, because I'm a scientist. So just looking at the data, especially the famous chart where he superimposes CO2 over how many million years and the temperature, and it actually matches. To me, that is just such an iconic moment.
Yes.
He did that. And it literally sent shivers down my spine when I saw that.
Yeah.
So after I guess 2007, I kept sort of going back and forth, still being very busy with my career and being, a very selfish human. Until I realized that I couldn't pretend anymore, because it had reached me. It was beginning to eat me. I was spending my time in toxic corporate environments, understanding what the chase for power and profit does to people and to colleagues, and just being enmeshed into these pointless office games. And I just kind of put the two and two together. How we create these toxic cultures, and this toxicity goes to everything around us. It goes into nature as well. We exploit each other, and we exploit nature so that we can keep building this exploitation machine. This is why it's an all-encompassing crisis. It's a human crisis, it's a nature crisis, it's a social crisis, it's going to become an economic crisis, because we have gone past the overshoot, right? And that made me compelled to begin to write, because it was my therapy. I think that's how many writers start. To me, I had to tell my story, my personal story, and from then on, I regarded it my life's purpose to awaken other people through my writing.
Yeah. And are you able to, I'm curious, are you able to generate enough income through your writing to sustain yourself, or do you have to sort of supplement doing something else?
Absolutely not. Yeah, I do something else. So I still work for an employer, and the writing, I'm lucky enough to have free time, mostly in the evenings, and that's when I do a lot of the writing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm assuming, I don't want to assume anything because I don't know anything about your personal life. So you're single and don't have kids, which gives a lot of more time to write.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Because when I was 23 years old, I got married and immediately Allison got pregnant. So I grew up with kids. So the only time I could write my first book, Earth Spirit, the subtitle was A Handbook for Nurturing an Ecological Christianity. It's just a little 117 page thing. I wrote it between 4 and 6 a.m. over a period of 2 months, because if I woke up at 4 and the kids didn't wake up till usually 6:30 and Allison, so it was the only time of the day that I was either not pastoring, because I was at that time pastoring a church in New England, or parenting. And so that was my sole time to write, is between 4 and 6 a.m.
I lived in New England. I lived in one of my degrees is in Massachusetts. I lived in Amherst and Northampton for 3 years.
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely loved it.
Yes, no, I love Western Massachusetts. We lived in Granville. I was pastor of the only church in a town of 1,500 people. So it was like I was the town parson in the old New England sense. And we would go up to Amherst and Northampton all the time. I just love the foothills of the Berkshires. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm curious, how do you understand our predicament now? And like when you look out, say 2, 5, 10 years, what's your sense of things?
Well, our predicament to me is very simple. I think it's very simple to anyone with a science background so far. I mean, depending on the personality, there are still some scientists that have the denial sort of personality that a lot of us have, that we are born with. It's a survival technique to deny reality. It's a fantastic mechanism that the human brain has. Absolutely. To deny reality and to create its own reality. Mm-hmm. Other animals can't really do that. But I think for someone who is pragmatic and realistic about numbers and evidence, it's very clear that I think overshoot is the word that really in a very cold and quantitative way defines where we are. Yeah. I'm a passionate antinatalist. I believe that it's a function, population is the biggest culprit, because, Earth just can't feed us all, and we can't decrease our consumption and our emission per capita to such a spectacular degree that we can even sustain the current population, and that gets me in trouble. So I'm very, very much alone in that sense. And to your question about the 2 to 5 years, I don't get hung up on like, when is it going to happen? I think what's important is that it's going to happen soon, and it's happening already. So
yeah, that's my sense, is that we're already well into overshoot, and we're well into the collapse of we're 200 years into the collapse of the biosphere, the health of the systems that we depend upon, but we're also a couple of decades at least into the collapse of Holocene stability in terms of the climate and civilizational contraction and collapse too. It's just that most people have not studied the rise and fall of civilizations, so they don't understand that collapse isn't like a building falling down. It's a step-by-step process, and that often takes many, many decades.
And I absolutely love your video on, I think, what was it, the 81 or 80s something civilizations that have collapsed. That is absolutely brilliant. I enjoyed watching that, and it does bring it to life. It has happened 80 times before. We're not crazy doomers here.
Exactly. But none of us, or almost none of us, grew up in either families or churches or synagogues or mosques or schools where we were taught that. So, we're taught this myth of perpetual progress. And so we think of civilization singularly. There was the hunter-gatherers and Neolithic, and then you got civilization, and now you've got us. And aren't we the most advanced creatures? And I didn't learn anything about dozens and dozens of previous civilizations and the patterns. I didn't learn any of that stuff.
One thing that trips people is that they falsely connect the progress of technology, which seems pretty linear or even exponential, to an expectation that this means that everything else is going to be more positive, better,
Yes.
and which is not true.
Right. From an ecological perspective, that's a delusion, but most of us don't have an ecological education, you know?
Yeah, ecological education is actually really important. If any of us, if all of us, each of us took one ecology course, and if we had courses in university called, extinction ecology, or
Yes.
I've just in my recent book, in my fiction book, I've made up this university of the future, and all the courses in the university are like, collapse biology, extinction ecology 101, advanced principles of ecological apocalypse, because that's all they had to study
Yes,
20 years from
exactly.
now.
Right,
But
sure.
things like, people don't know that there were flocks as big as massive clouds of passenger
Exactly.
pigeons
Exactly.
flying over the United States, that the American chestnut tree, there were something like 12 billion of them.
Yes.
And it was an absolutely massive tree that even entire human communities depended on those chestnuts, which were the most sweet chestnuts that the world has ever seen.
Yes.
Uh, our human memory is as brief as our lifetime. And even
Yes.
in my lifetime, I'm recognizing things like, there's no insects on my windscreen anymore when I'm driving.
Mm-hmm.
It has really accelerated so much.
Yes.
And the more it does, the more we're actually preoccupied with other things. So
Yes.
things are really becoming, I think the worst scenario is actually coming, that sort of Mad Max scenario. Now we have this war. And you can argue that all of this is a result of Overshoot. In my
Yes.
opinion, the pandemic was a
Yes.
result of Overshoot, because
I
obviously
completely agree.
we got in contact with more wild animals because of our exploitation of nature,
Mm-hmm.
and because the increase in temperature also, increases expands the habitat of organisms. Many scientists have made this point. So this overshoot has caused climate change. It has caused the plague. You can say it has caused the war in Syria. A lot of people are now admitting that
Yeah.
Syria was because of climate change. And conflict unfortunately brings more conflict, and the more
Yes.
resources dwindle, the more humans will murder each other for the resources that are left. I mean, God forbid, we're not going to run out of wheat in the next 3 months because of the war in Ukraine and Russia. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
No.
I think inflation is really interesting, because inflation now is in my opinion going to enter a permanent state, and
Oh, I
it
agree.
is a measure of how dear the price of everything becomes.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's a principle again of overshoot.
Yes,
It's the
exactly.
same curve that you see when you're growing bacteria. When I was doing that in university, when
Exactly.
you reach the top of the curve, all the
Yeah.
bacteria go, well, wait, there's no food. So they start shutting down and they
Yeah.
start eating each other, and all kinds of different things happen. Um, we are an organism just like them.
Yes, exactly. No, I'm with you 100% on all that. I mean, that's why I found William Catton's book Overshoot to be so helpful and insightful, because it helped me realize that population pressure is such an unseen dynamic that actually affects everything. And you add that to his understanding of the difference between a time of carrying capacity surplus and then a time of carrying capacity deficit, and the social
Yeah.
dynamics is just absolutely huge.
Earth is no different from a petri dish. There is a finite amount of food
Right.
inside this petri dish. Um, so yeah, once the population goes over,
Yeah. Well, George, I'm curious. So, who have been the authors or the people who you feel that have either been mentors for you or that you've really greatly appreciated their impact on your intellectual or your life? Um, So that's one question. And then what do you do? How do you think or feel like, what practices or exercises or whatever do you make use of to help you wake up each day excited to be alive and to contribute the ways that you can? You know, what's in your toolbox for not just coping, but doing even better than that? I'm always interested in what have been the influences on people in terms of their mentors or teachers or schools of thought or whatever, but also in terms of what helps them stay mostly sane, mostly inspired, mostly on purpose, mostly equanimous, rather than just utterly depressed or freaked out or whatever. So those are two different questions. Would love to hear.
My influences are quite diverse. There's too many authors to mention. I think for me, people that have been directly involved in activism have always inspired me. Extinction Rebellion has been a huge inspiration for me. You know, from George Monbiot, you know, the whole team at Extinction Rebellion, they had a way of illustrating the urgency.
And you mentioned before we started recording this, you mentioned that you live part-time in London and part-time in Greece.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see it.
Sapiens. Yeah,
Sapiens. Absolutely love it. You know, people who are able to who are brave enough to show us the mirror so that we can see the human that we really are and the human that we could be. The potential that we have to be a different human. So it's come really from different places, and most of the, I guess, authors that I've been in awe of are people that are actually not very known. Some of them are more active in Facebook. Some of them are quite like Gabor Mate, for example. You know, he's treatise on the way that we process trauma and how we push it further inside of us, and then it comes out in a very, very destructive way. So, you know, our relationship with trauma by Gabor Mate, our relationship with death, which is also very toxic because we have this sort of, and I think, what's the name of the guy? Something Solomon.
Oh yes.
I forget his first name.
Yeah. I've watched a lot of his stuff. It begins with an S, something Solomon. Anyway, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Wait, he is brilliant because these people are not talking about environment. They're going much deeper. They're going back to the human, because this is a human-caused crisis, and it's a crisis of the human soul. So it's about our relationship with trauma, our relationship and how we process death, which we are terrified of, and in our search, in our attempt to win over death and become immortal, we are killing everything around us. You know, consumption is actually a death cult.
Yes, it is.
Because
absolutely.
Consumption and capitalism, the principle of capitalism is to put a price tag on everything and to put an expiration date on everything. So capitalism, the principle of capitalism is to kill everything, even if it's something like a fridge that is supposed to be made to last decades. We put obsolescence in it as an industrial design technique so that it breaks down and we have to buy new. You know, everything, you know, from milk to electronics, everything is made to die. And this is a cult that then carries on to other things, you know, even, you know, employees, they are expendable. Everything is expendable and everything can be basically thrown out, not recycled, thrown out.
Right, exactly.
So the invention of garbage, which is just makes no sense on this planet. What is garbage? There is no such thing as garbage on Earth. Everything ends up somewhere. before humans came, there wasn't a single item on this planet that could be classified as there's no use for it.
Yeah,
but now
no.
we have things like radioactivity and plastic. So we've actually created materials that there is no use for.
Well, and even worse than that, that continue to persist as toxic for, geological timescales. Oh, it's Sheldon Solomon. Yeah.
Sheldon Solomon.
Yes.
Love the guy.
Yeah, no, me too. Are you familiar with Stephen Jenkinson by any chance?
By name sounds familiar.
I'll send you a link because he's one of my favorite. He's up there with Sheldon Solomon. I mean, Stephen Jenkinson is just amazing. He's a death worker and sort of has a whole. There was a documentary, an hour and 10-minute documentary done on him in Canada on the Canadian Film Board. It was called Grief Walker, and he brings sort of a science-based and ecologically oriented understanding of death and the rhythms and cycles of nature. It's just really brilliant stuff. It's great stuff.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So who are some of the other people that you either consider colleagues that you really respect and admire and sort of feel aligned with, or just, I'm trying to get a sense of your own sense of your in-group in terms of the people who think and feel and that you get inspired by and that you in turn are an inspiration to.
I wouldn't say I have a tribe. I'm kind of a loner in many ways. My personality is what is it? What am I? INFJ, which is just 1% of the population. Right. We are complete loners. We are very much big picture. We alternate between different states. We have a very kind of split personality almost in a way, but that also allows us to be very objective and to lean on many different influences. So yes. I like anyone who is from the most sort of like academic and eloquent sort of environmentalist, like for example, take Naomi Klein, who is in the circuit of academics, to people who are complete doomers. I'm going to swear, I'm going to tell it like it is. I don't know if Chris Hedges, for example, might be in that category, but and I alternate also between these worlds. So as long as someone has an honest voice, they are always good in my book, and someone who speaks the language of nature, because this is to a very big level. What I try to do is I try to shine the light back on humans, being like, it's not the only species on this planet. Right. There's 8 million species, and they actually deserve the same rights as you. So humans might have houses, passports, permits to live in America, UK, Greece. Plants and animals are not given residence rights, passports. They have the right to life. They have the right to well-being.
Right.
And we have this. We have, what do we call it? I used to be in Amnesty International. I used to head that up in when I was a college student. And we always really defended, the Human Rights Act. And I feel like, well, we need one for plants and animals.
Yes, I could not agree more. But my mentor, one of my great mentors, in addition to William Catton, was Thomas Berry. And he regularly spoke about, that democracies are a conspiracy against the natural world because they give all rights and privileges to individuals and corporations to basically do what they want, where what we need is a biocracy, where the voices and the presence and the beings of the living world also are represented in the systems of jurisprudence and its systems of governance.
Yeah, we are really, it's sad that it looks like the world is going to end without us actually even coming close to realizing the bias of being human-centric and the narcissism that we have in terms of thinking that we are intelligent and that, a cat is not intelligent because it cannot verbalize or it cannot make emotional faces, because how cats are just very kind of, but they just don't speak your language.
Exactly.
They have other ways, they'll wag their tail. They have, we put an octopus in a little, cage with, treats and see if it's going to be able to find the way to unlock we think of intelligence as a way of getting yourself out of trouble,
right?
Being able to find food and being able to overcome obstacles. What about emotional intelligence?
Right.
What about the intelligence to be able to be aware of your surroundings and your connection to everything?
Yes.
I know this is going to sound cheesy, but I love that movie, Avatar.
Oh, yes.
Because the message is about this connection, this thread that runs through all life. That is this common language, almost like a neural network. And Earth does have this. We have this on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And we've burned out that connection in our mind because we are now we're all little laboratory animals living in these houses with electricity and buttons everywhere, and just everything is just like you open the fridge and there's everything in there. You don't even know where it came from.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just babbling.
The to my mind, defining intelligence in any way that isn't connected to ongoing, a reciprocal relationship with the living world, where you are benefited by the living world, the biosphere, and where you in whatever ways contribute, rather than just using. And that's what we've done.
We confuse intelligence with processing power.
Yes, exactly.
As if we are computers. And I mean, this is the tragedy of humanity, that we suddenly, at some point in evolution, developed this brain. Our brain size suddenly exploded. And even to this day, we still don't know how to use this brain. It's like you gave a kid suddenly a mega computer, a quantum computer. You moved that kid from a tiny little, disk suddenly to a mega computer, and it's now able to send nuclear missiles to wherever it wants. We are still, after creating all this civilization, we're still not able to harness and control this brain, which can do, of course, all these great things because it's a huge brain, but it is very selfish.
Exactly.
Everything that we've done has been for us. We have not actually given anything back. All we've done is,
Well, the we is one that I might challenge, only because one of the main things that I've studied the last 9 years is the difference between ecocentric cultures and anthropocentric cultures. Cultures that measure wealth and well-being in terms of how well is the soil doing decade by decade, how well the forest doing decade by decade, how well are the other species doing decade by decade, that's the measure of wealth and well-being, and that we as a culture only survive and thrive when we attend to that first. That's what I call ecocentrism or life-centeredness, versus human-centered or anthropocentric. And it seems to me every anthropocentric civilization that I know of, I don't know of a single counterexample that hasn't gone into overshoot, unless like a volcano wiped them out or something. And so I did find the Teddy Goldsmith quote, though. So he says, again, this is Edward Goldsmith, who was the founder and editor of the Ecologist magazine for close to 40 years. He says, it may not be irrelevant to note that even very modest forms of life, like earthworms, dung beetles, and fiddler crabs, have no trouble identifying the real problems that they must deal with if they are to survive. So calling our kind of intelligence the most advanced is where I sometimes bristle. Not that you haven't done that, but
I spent 5 minutes last week just looking at this worm that had emerged bravely from a hole in the concrete, and I could tell that it was completely blind, but its body was just swerving, and the thing could probably sense different wavelengths or smell things. You could see that it was sensing the whole world around it.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, George, I want to begin winding this down, but I want to come back to the question, what helps you on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis? Like what inspires you, what supports you? Do you have any practices, exercises? Like what is it that allows you to know what you know and yet to be engaged? I mean, I see you, in fact, when I first encountered you, I saw you sort of in an archetypal pattern of more of a shaman, which is more the sort of the solitary, the person, the big picture and that sort of thing. But how do you—
not very far. I don't know what we want to call it, my coping mechanism. Let's call it coping mechanism. I mean, the world's coming down. Especially in the last few years, and I would say the pandemic sort of accelerated that and in a way enabled it.
Yes.
I've led an almost monastic life.
Sure.
And it is unbelievably relaxing.
Yes.
Because this is the problem. This is why we're all asleep, because we are too busy, too saturated with, from social media to going from this meeting to that meeting, jumping on this train, on that car. So I essentially, I guess my coping mechanism is just removing things from my life, whether they are physical things. So I'm an actual minimalist. I live in a flat with no pictures on the walls. I've got 2 plates in the kitchen. I just love this. It's just, you cherish things. I eat soup from the same cup where I make my coffee, and I absolutely love it because everything then becomes so special.
Yes, yes.
So, and this allows me to keep things simple so that my never sleeping brain is able to feel inspired and to find meaning in a way that's free of distractions and the manipulations of Netflix and all of this and all of that. And I do struggle, I know that a lot of my fans are on Facebook and they message me, and I do struggle to have conversations with them, but it is still a good medium because people send me amazing information or amazing quotes, and my fans write better than me. I swear to God, some of them really need to start writing because they just send you the most amazing messages.
Yeah. The big thing that I've done in the last 4 months, I've started doing these, what I call post-doom, no gloom Zoom calls twice a week. So on here in the East Coast, United States time, it's on Wednesday nights, 8:30, and then Saturdays at 1 p.m. And we get 30, 35 people on every call. And it's basically just a space, a virtual space for 2 hours where people can be authentic about, their understanding of collapse, their understanding of overshoot, their understanding of abrupt climate change, their understanding of whatever challenges they're dealing with in there, because people are all over the world, most people are in North America. But a lot of people feel lonely. There's not a lot of people they can talk to. I mean, they don't have the kind of internet, Facebook community or Facebook, connections that you and I have. And so they can't talk. Sometimes they can't talk to their spouse or the people closest to them. And so this is a safe space to be authentic about things like collapse that they can talk to and not feel like that they're, pariah or, stay away. Don't talk to me about that stuff. So, well, George, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think it also helps to keep things positive in the sense that what I've observed about myself is I did go through a big depression. And then I realized that it was almost a bit selfish because I was grieving about my life and humanity and the nature that was attached to humanity, the world that we have known. But Earth will continue without us. And this is something to actually look forward to.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and that takes an ecocentric worldview. That takes a larger than human worldview to relax into that and to trust the process. I mean, evolution and ecology are my sort of sacred disciplines. I mean, I've got a little credo that I've sometimes used where I say, reality is my God, evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. Integrity is my spiritual path. And promoting accountability to the future is my mission. And that's including, even if we not if, but when we go extinct as a species, however soon or far that is, and I think it's probably pretty likely that it'll be soon. Nonetheless, my wife, for example, is one of the North America's leading point people in terms of assisting trees in migrating faster than any other animal can move their seeds. It's just the field of assisted migration. And so that gives her life joy. I mean, all she's doing is increasing the odds of some species of trees moving forward. But I think that that's something that we humans can do that's bigger than us. You know, we can cap the nukes, or at least we can try to do what we can to prevent, you know, dozens and dozens of nuclear meltdowns. You know, there are a few things that we can do. Even just building topsoil, you know, you might help some worm or some, you know, species of whatever survive on your little plot of land. So ecocentric actions that can nourish us in the process and that are pro-future, regardless of whether we survive or not. I think that's the stuff that gives me joy.
That's brilliant. Yes, this is such a healthy attitude. It does take bravery. It does take a leap of faith to reach that element, but to reach that level. But that is absolutely, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. Well, George, anything you'd like to say to bring this conversation to completion? And then where do people go to get your stuff and read more about you and from you?
I would like to reiterate what you said, that, you know, you guys watching, you are not alone. You are not alone. There are millions of us, and there's going to be even more of us. There's millions more each day, I think. You can check me out on Twitter. I babble all day. 99 Black Balloons with 1 L. Check out my website, tsakraklides.com. All of my blogs are in there. My books are on the evil capitalist website Amazon. Best I could do. Hey ho. Yeah, Google me.
Yes, good, thanks. And I'll put that in the description box of the YouTube video as well. George, blessings on you, brother. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for bringing together sort of science, the best of the scientific tradition with this deep ecological, again.
We need both.
Yes.
We need both the heart and the evidence.
For more information about this project, go to postdoom.com.